How do you go through mediation when the other side isn't great at compromise, to be kind? This is a really good question, and one that I face pretty regularly because I am a mediator in New York State, so it's something I deal with on the regular. I think that mediating, when you have a bit more of a high conflict or a very high conflict arrangement or relationship, it can absolutely be done, and I have done it with success. But you need to go into that mediation with a very different mindset and a very clear understanding of your goals. Because your mediation, because you have a more high conflict individual or a very high conflict individual, your mediation is going to be very different than the couple that is, we've just kind of reached the end of the road and we need to resolve this. Your mediation is not going to be, you're not going to be able to lock down every single term. You're not going to be able to add in all these little things that feel right or feel like a good option for you or your family or your kids. Your mediation is going to be much more focused on what are the high level things that I need to get agreement on in order for my kids or me to feel comfortable or to feel supported moving forward. Supported being emotionally, financially, variety of ways. So your goals have to inherently be different when you are mediating with somebody who is a difficult personality. So in addition to figuring out or finalizing, fine-tuning your goals, you're also going to want to make sure that you're picking the right mediator. Mediators in New York State range the gamut, and that's not a bad thing. There's mediators who are not attorneys, there's mediators who are attorneys, there's mediators who have had tons of training, and there's mediators who have not had too much training. And there's mediators that have specific training in dealing with high conflict individuals. You're going to want to research for that type of mediator because that individual has the training that they may need to be able to work through that personality clash and to be able to get that person to make agreements on items that are very important. They also recognize where, hey, maybe we can't get this type of term in this agreement, but what are the overall goals that you need? What are the overall pieces that you need to have met? So first, when you're mediating with a difficult personality, you want to know your goals. And then secondly, you want to choose the right mediator for your case, for your matter. And that mediator is somebody who ideally should have had training of some sort in high conflict mediation. Now, let's talk through how do you finalize or fine-tune your goals when you're going through mediation with a high conflict personality. Well, I think this takes some time, and so my suggestion is that you set aside the time you need to truly be able to go through your goals and make sure that they're ones that you absolutely have whittled down to the ones that are important not just now, but will be important 5 years from now. Because if you're just talking about something that's really going to help you for the next year or so, and you're fighting to the death to get that, the next year is going to go like that. You're really looking at, hey, this agreement is going to be in place for 5, 10, maybe 18 years if you've got little kids. You want terms that are truly going to be able to be in place for that long term, okay? So if you are mediating in New York State and you have a high conflict individual on the other side, what are my top 2 things to be aware of? First, be aware of what your true goals are, not just right now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And when I say goals, I don't mean I want the kids on Wednesday nights because we've got dance practice to go to. I mean, you want to have a schedule that allows for flexibility that's necessary as the children grow. Okay, that is the type of goal because that has a little bit more ability for you to fine tune it as you're going through the sessions. The second thing that you really need to make sure that you have in place when you're mediating with a high conflict individual is you have to have the right mediator. There's mediators who are specifically trained in high conflict mediation or mediating with high conflict individuals, and that's the type of mediator you need because the mediator needs to understand how to get somebody who doesn't want to agree, maybe not to agree, but to get them to move forward because it's just continually getting closer to the agreement. If you have those 2 things, you are at least further along than a lot of people that I work with. So once you have those 2 things, how do you handle the sessions, right? So let's talk about How do you handle a session, a mediation session, with a person who has high conflict personality or high conflict individual? Well, I think the first thing is to properly prepare your mental state, because you know this is going to be challenging. You don't want to go in armed for the fight, because that's only going to create a fight. You want to go in with a strategic plan, right? And how do you create that plan? Well, you certainly can try and work it through yourself. But I truly think that if you want this mediation to be successful, your best option is to get an attorney who can help you strategize how to present yourself, how to prepare yourself, and how to really sort of instill the drive that you really need to be able to stand up to this person, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that's actually going to get you results. Okay? And so hiring your own independent legal advice or your own attorney throughout the course of a mediation is absolutely something that happens, and it's absolutely something that happens or should happen in situations where there is a very high conflict person in the mediation room. All right, so let's say you maybe can't hire an attorney because you just don't have the funds. I totally understand. Here's what I want you to do in order to prepare for these sessions. First, make sure you've cleared out maybe the day before. All right, obviously you've got to go to work, but try to keep the day before as low priority or low commitment as you can. The key here is you want to avoid stress, because we retain stress as human beings. We retain stress for hours, for days. You want to reduce your stress levels on the day and a half leading into this mediation session. Now, of course, you have kids, you have a life. Life is just stressful. Try to do things that don't add stress to that, okay? So then you're going to want to take out a piece of paper. You're going to write down your goals. And again, when we're framing our goals, we're not just talking about what I want Wednesday nights. We're talking about broad brushstrokes. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Your kids' lives to look like in 5 years? That could be that I want to make sure that the kids are staying in the same school district. Okay? It could be a variety of things, but you want to make sure that you're looking broad brushstrokes, not just the actual schedule, because that schedule very well could change over the course of the years. You're going to want to write those down. Order them. This is my top priority. This is my second. Because if you don't know the order of your goals, you could very well accidentally compromise on something that you realize later is actually a pretty big one. All right? So write down your goals, order them. Then think about, how am I going to present this? Because here's the thing. You know the high conflict individual better than anybody else in that room, better than the mediator, better than anybody else. You know them the best. And that means that you have likely been involved in situations where you've had to negotiate with them, right? Because you needed to get, I don't know, Susie to dance class, and you had to both figure that out. So think through what is the best way that I've noticed to get the pieces that are important to me. I'm positive that there are some things that you can think of. Write that down under each goal, all right? And then I want you to go forward and think through the meeting, and think through, just strategize how you're going to attack each and every piece. And this can be a little hard because you might not exactly know the flow of the meeting. So you absolutely can call up the mediator's office and just ask, hey, can you just quickly outline for me what the flow of the first meeting looks like, or what the flow of the next meeting looks like? And at the end of each meeting, ask, what are we going to cover in the next meeting, just so I can be prepared. It can be really helpful to just game out a few scenarios in your head. Because again, you know this person better than anybody else. You probably know what they're going to say in response to most of what you want. So think about, how are you going to respond to them? And then I want you to keep in mind the following thing, the following phrase. It's something that my mentor said to me when I was first starting practicing, and it's something that I try really hard to remember on the daily basis. And the phrase is the following: when the room heats up, I cool down. You know that this high conflict individual can be really complicated, really agitating, and very difficult. When they heat up, you have to stay calm and cool and collected. Not looking like you're coming from a cowering position, but much more like, this does not bother me. You can go be crazy. I am here. I am poised, and I am refined, and I'm good to respond when you're ready to hear me. And you just want to stay calm, cool, and collected, because you're going to come across as very confident in that arrangement. All right. Mediating with a high conflict individual is not an easy thing. It is doable though. And just as a reminder, the top 3 things to do when you're mediating with a high conflict individual are the following. First, you're going to want to get a mediator who has training in managing or mediating high conflict individuals. Second, you're going to want to plan out your goals. Forward thinking, not just what I want for this year, but what do I want 5, 10 years, 15 years down the line? What do I want my life to look like? Not what do I want the custody schedule to look like? What do I want my life to look like? Because that's going to help you as you need to change between proposals. You're going to have a better sense as to what you need to see in a proposal to be able to agree to it. And then the last thing is you really want to take time to decompress right before the session, the day or 2 before, and think it through. Walk through in your mind's eye what that session could look like, what the high conflict individual might say, how they might respond, what they might propose, and how you're going to respond to them. And then on the day of, you really want to think about when the room heats up, when they heat up, I stay cool. These tips have helped certainly me help people manage and mediate in a high conflict divorce situation. And I'm really hoping that they help you. Good luck.